Hi, all. Happy Thursday. I am getting a little bit of a late start. I was in a little car accident earlier, so I was there for a little bit longer than anticipated, which means I'm back home and uploading this a lot later than I wanted to. So, without any further ado, I want to take this opportunity to remind you of the disclaimer. I will post it in the comment section for you to read over just to make sure that you're okay with the graphic nature of some of the images that will be viewed in this episode. From a very young age, everyone knew that Tamara was destined for great things in her life. She was wise beyond her years, extremely compassionate and empathetic, always looking out for others and trying to help out in whatever way she could. Tamara planned on turning this passion into a career as she wanted to be a doctor. And this was so much more than just a childhood dream to her. It was a deep-rooted passion. So after high school, Tamara started pre-med at Humboldt State University in Arcata, California. Tamara had made it to her bachelor level in college before realizing that becoming a doctor was not going to allow her to help people in the way that she felt was important. Once in school, she started to feel like doctors didn't spend enough time with their patients and they didn't focus on them enough, so she decided to not continue on with this career path. Tamara had always been highly intelligent and empathetic, but it seemed that she was someone who did far more than just empathize with others. She seemed to try to absorb others' pain, and in doing this, whether or not she was able to alleviate them of it, she would carry it with her. Carrying the pain of others and always putting others above herself is something that Tamara had always done, and around her teen years she started self-medicating this pain with alcohol and put herself on the back burner more and more, trying to care for everyone else but never herself. Tamara suffered from what others have referred to as escapism, which is when a person seeks relief from reality. Escapism usually occurs due to a terrible and traumatic life event or events. I haven't found anything pointing towards Tamara having the terrible life that would cause her to want to escape, but her parents weren't together, so that might be a piece of the puzzle or the starting point. Kids respond to life events differently, and divorce or separation of parents can definitely be traumatic events for them. It seems she may have been struggling and undiagnosed with other ailments, or maybe even misdiagnosed, which may have also been a reason for her parting ways with the medical field. If she was not receiving the attention she needed and she couldn't get to the bottom of her own health and mental health issues, this may have shifted her interest in pursuing a career as a medical doctor. After Tamara's departure with the school, she studied with her significant other, who was becoming a trade electrician, until she became pregnant. When she became a mother, she felt no other job in the world was more important than taking care of her son, but also needing to generate an income, she waitressed at a restaurant. She loved her job, the people she worked with, and her customers, but regardless of the joys in her life, the need to self-medicate was always there. Tamara finally came to realize her drinking was a full-blown addiction, and with this, she was finally able to seek help. There's an old psychology saying the first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem, and this is the truest statement ever made. So much of the time we hear people who are in denial, but once this shifts, the healing can begin. Because let's face it, no one will ever seek help for something that's not a problem, right? It doesn't matter what others around you see or say, it's the internal realization that can spark the change that's needed. And for Tamara, it definitely made a change, just not the one she was intending. After this enlightenment that her drinking was an addiction, Tamara checked into a detox center where she would be able to kick her addiction for good. She hated the thought of being away from her son, but she knew it was necessary. Tamara went to rehab and came out a totally different person, But this person was not a happier, healthier, sober version of Tamara. Something had changed in her, and this led to a downward spiral, and she eventually became a missing person, as her family didn't know that she left town. Her mother had made flyers and filed a missing person report, then took to social media in hopes that her daughter would be found, and she was. She immediately got comment after comment saying her daughter was seen walking the streets in Crescent City, California, a few hours north, looking like she was in a trance or a zombie. This led her mom to start calling the local hospitals and authorities in Crescent City, where she found that Tamara was actually in jail. According to various online comments, Tamara had been making a bad name for herself up in the Crescent City area. Many people said that she was trespassing on their property and referred to her as being a porch pirate, which is what they call a person who steals packages from people's porches. Once Tamara's mother was able to talk to her, she would learn the reason Tamara's trip to rehab didn't actually help her recover and made things so much worse. While Tamara was in the detox center for her alcohol addiction, there was another person detoxing from their addiction, but their addiction was not to alcohol and they were not really trying to recover. The individual in the detox center was there by court order, and knowing they would be away for a while, had snuck some of their drug of choice in with them. Their drug of choice is the very thing that is destroying families and lives in epidemic proportions in the United States and all over. While in rehab, Tamara was offered meth, and likely not knowing the consequences or how quickly she would become addicted, she accepted. This would send Tamara many places, but none of them a recovery, as she had just shifted her addiction from alcohol to meth. It's unclear who or what initially brought her to Crescent City, but she did not have a permanent residence there, and according to reports, she was always just wandering around. That is until a call came in to 911, and she would never be seen wandering again. On May 2nd of 2021, at about 11 p.m., a call came in to the Delnortecounty Sheriff Dispatch about a barn fire up by the old casino on Howland Hill Road. Upon arrival to the location, firefighters could tell that it wasn't going to be an easy task to get the fire out, as the building was metal and inaccessible. They could not get water inside easily, and it took hours to get the fire out. Not only were they having to fight to get water inside to extinguish the origin of the fire, they were fighting to keep it from spreading to nearby structures. With multiple fire crews from various stations in the area working to get this fire out, they had finally prevailed around 3 a.m. on May 3rd. The very large metal storage shed would be left for the moment, and investigators showed up the following day, on May 4th, to start looking around for clues as to who or what caused the fire. When they got there, they determined the shed was a car and heavy equipment storage, as there were multiple cars, car parts, and a forklift inside. There was not much room inside, and coming to pretty much the only clear area in the building, when they looked alongside of the car bordering that small clear area, they saw a completely burnt and unrecognizable body. They could not even tell if it was a man or woman, let alone who it was. The fingerprints were burned off, so during the autopsy, the medical examiner took various samples and sent out dental impressions. Eventually, a positive match was made, and this match stated that the burned body found in the storage building was Tamerasanders. In the time between her autopsy and her identification, Tamara's body had been buried as a Jane Doe and now had to be exhumed. Tamara's mother paid out of pocket for a second opinion autopsy, as the first did not generate many answers, and the second would provide a little bit more info, but it didn't solve the case. Tamara had died from smoke inhalation, but due to the condition of her body, the manner of death was not clear and is still listed as undetermined. This is usually the case when a death cannot be ruled as accidental, natural, suicide, or homicide. Even though authorities had evidence that makes the fire suspicious, and the second autopsy generated results proving the presence of accelerants on Tamara's body, they are not declaring her death a homicide, and her case has gone cold. A few things to consider in this case is that no one is going to just lay there and die. But being this storage was full of cars and other metal objects that would have become very hot in a fire, and it was explained as being stuffed wall to wall with these items, so escaping would have been difficult, but the fire would have had to be pretty far along for her to not be able to escape. I feel the only way she would have just stayed where she was is if she was incapacitated in some fashion and awoke surrounded in flames, unable to escape. It's well known that drug users do not think clearly and may take drastic, unnecessary measures to cover up a situation that is just an accident for fear of possible repercussions. If she was there with a companion and she became unconscious, this would make the other person panic and not think clearly, missing basic steps like checking for a pulse, believing her to already be dead. Then go into cover-up mode, lighting the fire, which would have caused Tamara to not be able to escape and pass from smoke inhalation. It is possible that she was simply just tired and had nowhere to go and was there alone and lit a fire to stay warm, falling into a deep sleep. Being a recovered addict myself, when I was in my active addiction to meth, I would stay up for so many days that sometimes my body would literally just shut down wherever I was. Sometimes I was in the bathtub, sometimes I was in my bed, sometimes while driving, or just wherever I happened to sit down at the time. She may have knocked a lamp onto herself, and that's how the accelerant showed up on her body. By the time she came to, the fire was too far along, and this was all just a tragic accident. Regardless of how this happened, Tamara definitely was still alive after the fire started, as the owner of the building who called 911 reported to them he heard what he thought were gunshot pops and a woman screaming for help. Being it was a fire in a building full of cars and equipment, there are likely many things that could have made a popping sound. Maybe there was even ammo stored in there and the fire heated it to the point of popping off. But you can't really mistake a woman screaming for help. And this is something that seemed to be completely disregarded. After the fire was out in the early morning hours of May 3rd, no search was conducted, and it took another day for the search to occur, and at this point in time, Tamara's body was found. You would think that hearing someone screaming for help would have made it a priority after it was safe to at least check around for life or a body, but this was not done until the next day. It is equally disturbing that the barn was inaccessible and locked up, but Tamara was in there. That raises another question. How did she get locked in? And being locked in, how could it be considered anything other than a homicide? Reports have the event listed as, quote, suspicious, but nothing is really being done to solve the case or look into it. In recent writings online, law enforcement is called out as doing nothing, which is not uncommon in County, especially considering Tamara's heritage. Being an indigenous woman, Tamerasanders is now part of the missing and murdered indigenous movement, but her family will not let her death be forgotten. Unfortunately, crimes against indigenous are not a priority and seem to remain cold cases regardless of age or gender. The missing and murdered indigenous movement generally refers to the alarming numbers of missing and murdered indigenous women and children, and these cases just seem to not matter. It happens frequently because those who take them and harm them know that nothing will be done. Even when there are heaping amounts of evidence, murder cases remain cold, justice is never served, and the missing never come home. The statistics on addiction are 1 in 5, and the statistics on mental illness are the same, also 1 in 5. Addiction can be something that affects anyone at any time. There is no rule book that says you have to be a certain age, race, to be an addict. You can be rich or poor, old or young, single or have a family, be a doctor, a lawyer, a grocery store clerk, unemployed. If you have a 5-bedroom house in the suburbs or you're sleeping on the streets, addiction can affect anyone. I know firsthand as I have been clean from meth for 18 years and the statistics on recovery are only 2%. Now I'm a mental health professional, and I can see that much of the time addiction starts as self-medication. We fear being shamed for seeking help, or if we do seek help, often we get misdiagnosed or receive no diagnosis and no help at all. So we help ourselves. I was given my first antidepressant at 14, and I've had postpartum depression with all of my kids. I'm almost 40 and just now coming to terms with the fact that I have ADHD, and many of the things that I have looked at as being something that's wrong with me, I'm now able to see they are part of that. I openly talk about my mental health issues and my previous addiction to give hope to those who are where I used to be. I know that kicking addiction is hard, and some days when I look back on the things that I did and the people I hung out with, I'm honestly surprised that I'm alive today. I was arrested a few times, and just to give an example of how things operate in Del Norte County in their justice system, the cop that arrested me the first time I was arrested was higher than I was. He was eventually caught for his corruption and fired, but it took years, and I could definitely tell you some stories about his time as an officer. I believe things like this contribute to the amount of cases that get overlooked also. With corruption and lax investigations, it seems that unless there's a confession or a random DNA match, things don't get solved. And if you're indigenous and die in Del Norte County, your death will likely be labeled as an accident or undetermined, so they never feel compelled to even try. At this time, I'm going to ask if anyone has any information about Tamerasanders' death. The contacts are listed here and can be reported anonymously, so if you know anything at all, please let her family get some closure. And that's going to do it for today. I hope you enjoyed hearing the story as much as I enjoyed telling it, and I really do hope that you never take that little statement that I made that I like telling stories about people's murders. I don't. I mean, I do. I love doing research, and I love getting the word out, and I love spreading awareness on certain situations. I do not like that people die. I do not like that their cases don't get solved and go cold, and that their families are just left wondering forever. If you haven't already, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss an installment. Like, love, leave a comment, and again, if you have any information, the numbers are listed. Just hit pause, jot down the number, call in. You can do it anonymously, and hopefully it will help get her family some closure.